Kia ora, tēnā tātou I roto I tēnei wahanga o te tau, ko te hōtoke tērā. Kāre e kore kua tau mai a hine takurua ki tōna taumata kia pipiri ai tātou te ira tangata. Ākoa ke nei ka rewa a puanga a matariki hoki kia māhuta ake ki te pai. He tohu o te pai, kia tātou katoa. Kei nā mate o te wā, haere rā, e moi, oki oki atu. Kia tātou te hunga ora, tuatahi ka tika me mihi atu ki nā iwi me nā hapu o tēnei rohe, nō rātou te mana ki te whanganui ātara ki pōneke nei. Kia koutou, o nā maunga whakahi, o nā wai whakaora, nā mana kei tēnā pito, o te motu e hono mai ana, e are mai ana I tēnei wā, tēnā koutou, Nau Mai rarau mai I tēnei haora. E rere taku manu, ki te whenua taurikura o kutupuna, ko te nehe nui tērā. Mōkau ki runga, tāmaki ki raro, manga toa ki wainganui. Pare hauraki, pare waikato, ara ko nā tohu whenua ērā o taku waka tainui e. Ko rere ahu te tūpuna, ko Ngāti kino hapu te hapu, ko o pārure te marae e pātatana ki taku manoa, no te rohe pōtai o kingi tāwhiao ahau. I tupu ahau ki roto I nā tini manaakitanga o nā marae me nā hapu o Ngāti Maniapoto, ko Jackie ahau. Warm greetings to you all this winter season. We can be in no doubt that Hine Takurua, the winter maiden, has ascended to her domain, causing us mere mortals to keep close and cling together in the cold. Soon, puana and matariki will rise and be elevated to our view of the horizon, a sign for us to reflect on what has been and to look forward to what is ahead. To those recently gone to the stars, our tupuna, our loved ones who have passed from our sight, we bid thee farewell. Go, sleep, rest. To us, the living who remain here, I first acknowledge those mandated iwi hapu authorities who determine matters here in Wellington City. I greet you. To you and each of you, I greet you. You and all your noble mountains, your waterways that refresh and rejuvenate, and the many sites of significance in each corner of the land, where you are and where you originate from. To you and each of you who has joined us today, who is listening at this time, I greet you, I welcome you to settle in with me this hour. Fly my bird to the thriving nirvana of my ancestors, the place they called Te Rehe Nui, the beautiful ancient forest. Mōkau to the south, Tāmaki to the north, Mangatoatua in between, the boundaries of Waikato and the boundaries of Hauraki, to the place they call the long armpit of Kaukauroa. Those are the landmarks of my waka, that is Tainui. I was raised to know and understand the many family and marae relationships that connect me to the several hapu and are affiliated to the iwi that I belong to, which is Ngāti Maniapoto. Rereahu, who was Maniapoto's father, is my principal ancestor. Kinohaku, one of Maniapoto's sisters, provides the name of my hapu. And Oparure is the marae that is closest to my heart. I was born and bred in the King Country. My name is Jackie Ngāwaka. To each of you, to all of us here today, I greet you. Thank you for taking the time to join me today, but what I'm sharing with you is not a step-by-step, do this, do that type of kōrero. The 10 tips are things you may already know about and will, after this, perhaps ponder more deeply, or there may be something new in them for you to discover and explore further, or perhaps something to consider according to your unique situation and to prompt you to act if you feel it is right. What I'm sharing today is based on the experiences of my life so far, which includes being a fair-skinned female who identifies strongly as Māori, coming from a whānau very active in marae life, and parents who were deliberate about finding success in mainstream systems in a society that they knew did not value being Māori. To then becoming a university student who became immersed in some of the lesser known history of Aotearoa, became conscientised to the impacts of colonisation, the inequities of Māori and the potential of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and formulating my own ideas about what it really meant when governments of the time were saying that Māori were falling through the gaps. And through to the most recent 20 or so years of my life, where I've had success in mainstream systems. I've gained significant experience working in by Māori, for Māori organisations, and grown as a mother and grandmother. All of that is context and background to the kōrero today, including what I've seen, what I've learned, some of the missteps I've taken, and the insights I've gained from watching others. Before we get into the 10 tips, just want to let you know that this webinar is the first in a series around Te Ao Māori that Ellen and Clark will be developing over the coming months. We'll be including other tangata whenua members of our teams and other tauiwi from our organisation as well, to talk more specifically about some of what we see, of what we do, and how Ellen and Clark is developing as a tangata tiriti organisation. So, 10 tips to help improve Māori engagement. Let's start with perhaps the first 3 that I've grouped together, which are around things that I think you should already know. They're sort of the basics, the tūā papa as we would say, the foundation. So for me, one of those first basics is around te tiriti. I fervently believe in the unique potential of Te Ao Māori to guide and drive the future prosperity of Aotearoa, of this country, and the importance of Te Tiriti o Waitangi in providing the legislative foundation for that to happen. For me, that's it. That's a base. If you haven't already, I would really encourage you to do some training around Te Tiriti, and if at all possible, get a cohort around you to learn and reflect with. Think about what might we see now if Te Tiriti had been consistently honoured, and you might look at that in your space that you work in your family, in your community, in whatever area you think, but what might it look like now? How would that affect decision making, resources, relationships if Te Tiriti had been consistently honoured? It's about understanding that what we're seeing today for Māori and seeing that in its bigger context, not only in terms of inequities, but also treaty settlements and reclamation of names and spaces and all that's going on for Māori, and understanding that in the context of Te Tiriti. It's also about understanding, recognising our responsibilities moving forward, not only in our organisations, but also personally. So Te Tiriti, number 1 basic. The second thing I think that's really important is to know is that Māori are diverse. We have mana whenua, whānau, hapu, iwi authorities, we're urban, we're rural, tamariki through to kaumata, and there are a number of stages in between there. There is different exposure and experience of mātauranga Māori, Te Reo Māori, tikanga and marae life throughout all people who identify as Māori. We have come from different religious backgrounds, we've had different educational experiences and success in education. We have different land or other resource holdings, particularly some in communal or collective interests. We come from different political persuasions as well. One single Māori will not give you a fullness of a Māori perspective. You need to recognise that. I'll give you an example too. Now, matariki. We're all talking about matariki. It is the time. For some, in some parts of the country, there are 9 whetū or stars that are acknowledged. In other parts of the country, there are 7. In other parts of the country, including where I come from, the marking of the new year is done by the longest night and the shortest day, rather than necessarily seeing the constellations rising. So there is, Māori are diverse. Third basic thing for Māori is that relationships are everything, and they can transcend every border or barrier, including time. So projects, initiatives, leaders, when we look back, can rise and fall based on the strength of relationships. People, Māori, may be more interested in where you come from and who you're related to or connected to before they want to talk to you about your plans or your kaupapa or your project. Be open and lean into that. Relationships are usually, probably always, long-term. So once you establish a relationship with Māori, try and nurture it and recognise that perhaps your short project deadline may well only be a tiny part of how Māori are thinking around that particular kaupapa. They may want to share what happened decades or hundreds of years ago to help you understand how things got to now. They may also be thinking decades or hundreds of years ahead to how your thinking or plans will impact on their mokopuna or generations beyond. Okay, so here's two things that can be quite common to avoid or stop doing. So the first one is stop telling Māori what your plan is for them. Instead, start now to develop multiple relationships, and as soon as you realise that you need specific Māori input for something, start making contact, because it may not happen as quickly as you would like or that fits in with your schedule. When you have established contact and are engaging, trust Māori with the issue you have. Get their opinion and response first before you start drawing conclusions about what should happen next. And I would also say be upfront about the challenges and issues that you can see, and encourage them to share the solutions that they see as well. Don't go there with a predetermined, this is how it's going to be, these are the limits of it. The other one to avoid doing is undervaluing Māori knowledge and expertise. Instead, treat Māori like your most trusted scientific, commercial or strategic advisors. Consult early and place a premium on their time and contributions. You know, what is the expectation that your most trusted advisors have? That's the same for Māori. Koha is a minimal acknowledgement, but aroha doesn't pay the bills. Explore, and you may want to explore options as well with Māori, because sometimes money can have unintended consequences when it comes to things like consulting. I'll give you an example. A Māori organisation I worked with, we had some kaumātua who were part of advisory in a governance capacity, and we wanted to show that, you know, we valued their time. And so we did that through the normal sort of governance channels of paying a fee for governance, etc. But what happened with some of those kaumātua who were mostly retired was, as those payments went through the monetary system, there ended up being unintended consequences, like them getting bills for ACC levies and tax and things like that, where they sort of ended up almost worse off than before. So think about all of those as well. You want to show that you are valuing their knowledge and expertise, and talking with them about that is a good option. The next 5 are, I would call them sort of steps, again, not necessarily in order, to more effective engagement. So the first one would be about identifying what I would call historical disablement. And this is to build understanding, acknowledgement, appreciation, and empathy. And this is connected to the first basic around te tiriti. So think about what legislation, systems, processes have had the effect of disabling Māori voices in decision-making related to your area? What is the history of your kaupapa when it comes to Māori voices and decision-making? An example with Te Reo. Imagine you're in an environmental organisation, entity. You're going to talk about a particular issue that you're very passionate about, a lot about from your perspective and training, etc. And it relates to an area of land, and the land that is being discussed was alienated from Māori ownership over 150 years ago and is now part of a Crown Reserve. Now, the kaumātua you are talking to is the grandson of the person that the land was taken from, by what is now recognised in public record as being dubious circumstances that breach te tiriti. So how might that knowledge, or even assuming that that scenario may be in play, inform your communication with that kaumātua, but also with other Māori in that area? Identify what's happened in history as far as you can to build understanding, acknowledgement, appreciation, empathy with the Māori people you are wanting to engage with. Another step is personal. Identify, reduce, mitigate personal bias. And I just want to acknowledge Jen Margaret from Groundwork for some of the kōrero today about this. And this is connected to diversity as well. So this is about self-reviewing and peer reviewing to reflect on your assumptions and identifying your assumptions, the things that you assume about Māori people that are colouring perhaps decisions that you make. There are, you can try an implicit association test. Hadn't heard of it before. Harvard runs some, you can look them up online, and you might be surprised at the implicit associations that you make. Ways to mitigate that bias as well is to counter perhaps negative stereotypes that you're used to seeing or buying into. For instance, read more Māori authors and Māori histories of the area, written by Māori of the area you either work in or live in or both. Learn Te Reo. Engage with Māori organisations. Those are all ways to try and counter the negative stereotypes. Also, see people as individuals rather than members of a particular group. Because as I'd said before, Māori are diverse. Think about, what is your colonisation story? How have you perhaps benefited, and what advantages have you been afforded because of access to resources and systems that have legitimised the structures that we have today? Best thing, I think, for tauiwi, for non-Māori, when it comes to the best position for you to be in when it comes to engaging with Māori, is to become an ally. Become an ally to Māori. Another step to more effective engagement, 3, I call them pātai pai, or good questions perhaps to Māori. And this is connected to the idea of valuing expertise and knowledge. So 3 good questions you might want to ask of Māori as part of your engagement on whatever kaupapa. 1, what does this mean to you? Ask that of the Māori people you're engaging with. 2, what do you think needs to happen here? And 3, how do you want to be involved? If you genuinely go with those 3 questions and listen for the answers and feel what is being said, you'll gain a whole lot of insights about Māori and related to your kaupapa. The other step is, and I guess this is talking more when probably with a lot of Crown agencies, but there will be other organisations as well who are looking to collaborate and develop partnerships with Māori. And that's really the key of this one, collaborate with others to develop a joined up response as much as possible. A good example that I was involved in, I'm a little bit biased to this one, but Te kotahi o te Tauihu Charitable Trust, based in the top of the South Island, was iwi mandated, and that was the first milestone. There were 8 iwi who all collectively agreed on some strategic priorities and mandated this trust to be formed. Then the delivery of those strategic priorities is supported and resourced by Crown agencies. So we had iwi coming together first of all to set the strategy, and Crown agencies in the region saying, how do we help make this happen? How can we help deliver on those priorities? That's a great example. And it's not a translated version of government systems. That's what the trust is moving towards, but a partnership model with recognition that Māori are the best people to solve the issues that affect them. And probably the last one is look for working examples for strengths and lessons and collaborations. A couple of examples that I could think of, one is the Waikato River Authority. A good example, I would say, of a co-governance arrangement. They're approaching 10 years now with the purpose of restoring and protecting the health and well-being of the Waikato and Waipa rivers. They have 5 iwi appointees, 5 Crown appointees with co-chairs from each. And that appears to be there will be strengths and lessons to learn from what they're doing working together. Ka Uruora, another one that I'm aware of, an iwi-led response to address systemic and persistent housing crisis, but working with iwi-led and working with other Crown agencies as well. And that kaupapa is to grow intergenerational well-being, includes savings, financial education, home ownership, all opportunities to move whānau towards financial independence. And they currently have about 9 iwi affiliated from Taranaki and Te Tauihu. So those are the 10 tips in a nutshell. Te tiriti, diversity, relationships, building trust, valuing expertise, identifying disablement, identifying personal bias, pātai pai, 3 good questions to get you on the road, and collaborate and look for strengths and lessons. So we've tried to distill some of the more popular questions across the many registrations that I'm going to sort of try and answer here and to just supplement some of the tips that I've already given. You can ask any other questions too by contacting us here at Allen and Clark. So the first question was around Te Reo, learning Te Reo, I don't know enough Te Reo, those sorts of things. So I would say the use of Te Reo is encouraged. We want to normalise Te Reo. But think about the purpose of why you're using it, your audience, your competency, and your source, and have some good sources. You know, avoid automatic translators that aren't backed up by a reputable source. And find safe spaces to practice. And hopefully that's in your organisation, if not in your home or in other spaces too. It's not always necessarily appropriate to, even if you're very keen, to stand up in a Māori hui to practice your pēpēha, say, for instance. Not always. It's more about the space rather than perhaps your desire to want to show that you know some Te Reo. Learning Te Reo is a personal, lifelong commitment. If you're just thinking about it for your job, you may be able to do a few things, but really it's lifelong. It really is, and it is personal. And you can't expect necessarily that workplaces or organisations will put you through learning Te Reo necessarily. You may have to take some of that on yourself. And if you really want to, then you will. And I encourage you to. But also remember that there are a whole lot of Māori people who for different reasons, don't know Te Reo as well. And so my personal thinking is that organisational resources around Te Reo should be targeted to Māori first. That's me personally. But if you've got a workplace that will support you, go for it. It's going to take a long time. You'll never be fluent. I will never be fluent. It's a long commitment. The other thing I want to note about Te Reo is that Te Reo there are spiritual unseen elements in Te Ao Māori, and Te Reo is what opens that up in a way. It's not just transactional. It's not just a translation of a word you already know in English or another language. It comes from another place as well. And so just to be aware of that. The second question we got was this: I'm afraid of offending people. If I don't do this, if I'm not good enough at that, if I haven't got it right, all those sorts of things. I think this probably comes with lots of kaupapa, not just engaging with Māori. But I would say feel the fear and do it anyway. When it comes to Māori, follow the leader is always a good tip. Follow the leader. Do what other people are doing. Attend more Māori kaupapa and hui and events so you become more comfortable about what people are doing and not doing. I think maintaining humility is really important. You don't need to know everything. You won't know everything, and that's fine. You're not expected to know everything. And also read the room. Just read the room and follow. Another question was about the relationship building, which we talked about. It takes time, which is true. So how do we engage short term? And this comes back to we've got a little piece of work that we want to get done and we need to get Māori input, but we don't have a lot of time. There's not much you can do about that in terms of if you don't have more time, you don't, but you won't necessarily get the result that you're looking for. So broaden your circles of networks now. Get people to make introductions for you if you need to, and use their networks as well. If you can do a face-to-face or a phone call before you meet people, that would be great, and before you email people, that would be great. Be flexible about how and when and where you meet people. You may need to go out of your normal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday hours in order to engage with Māori. And not only think about what you need, but what you can do and how you can help them. Those will all go towards building a relationship. And the last one was, how do I get my team or my organisation to change with me? Which is a good one. Learn everything you can. Change yourself first. But also in the organisation, ask for opportunities to share what you're learning with your team or with others. Find examples and lessons from other similar organisations. Be a squeaky wheel. Offer to help to make the change happen. And I think, again, generally, it's like with anything, again, read the room. Get to know the people who you think you need to influence.
So we've got a question here from Kirsty Buggins asking, how can Pākehā tau iwi be good allies and respond when seeing some of the harmful or negative activities, like the recent tour of an anti-co-governance speaker, without inadvertently giving more voice and visibility to those harmful causes, messages, and without being an unnecessary or unwanted saviour?
Oh, wow. Big question. Look, it sounds like that Kirsty is, you've got a good feeling about what you're trying to do, which is great. Becoming an ally, I think, is the position is becoming an ally to Māori. So I would encourage you to seek support from other Māori as well about how they, in your particular area, about how they would like support given. I don't think it ever hurts to stand up for what you think is right. But I would just encourage you to stay close with other Māori and other allies and build a group around you so that you don't feel like you're on your own and you are getting some help and support. That's something that we're just starting to do here at Allen & Clark with a Tauiwi Tautoko group. And a lot of it starts with people recognising things in themselves first, but also recognising that you're allied to support what Māori would like to do moving forward. So I would just encourage you to keep your networks and your relationships with Māori and other allies strong to get the support you need to deal with things, as they arise.
So Rebecca Henderson has just put in a question asking, if you don't have any connections already with Māori in your work, how do you get started?
I think I'd sort of talked a bit about this before. Perhaps talk to Māori colleagues about places, about people you could speak to. Again, if you're talking about a particular kaupapa, you may want to go back and look at what's happened historically around that kaupapa and identify where Māori have been relative to that kaupapa, which may give you ideas of the sorts of groups to connect with. You just have to start talking to people and asking questions and feeling your way through to find people who can support and help you.
And a question from Tina asking, so Tina's about to start a job back in New Zealand producing events. How does she make sure that she has diversity on her panels without it looking like it's tokenism?
Look, I would always say that when it comes to diversity, Māori is tangata whenua, start there, and let them guide you as to whatever other. So I don't include Māori necessarily in the diverse range of people. I see Māori as tangata whenua, and everyone else who has come into this country is tangata tiriti. So for me, that's the foundation, and then other diversity from there. It's tokenism if you're trying to tick a box, but if you're being genuine about wanting involvement, then bring them in, and don't just bring them in to be there to be seen, but make sure they're involved in decision making, in designing what things look like, in the way things run. Diversity, I think, is about bringing voices, not to be seen to be diverse, but to be heard and felt to be diverse, so that things actually change.
Danielle Carson asks if you have any advice around when matawaka and mana whenua don't see eye to eye. You leave that with them to sort out. You leave that with them. So we've got Bradley Wilkinson with our work impacts Māori nationally. What do you suggest by way of engagement, and what would you consider adequate in terms of engagement?
Without knowing exactly what your work in kaupapa and stuff is, Bradley, hopefully you already have some Māori in your organisation, perhaps in a governance space area, and start with them. I don't know what your without knowing your kaupapa, start with the Māori you have, and depending on whether your kaupapa is being run nationally all the time or there are some pockets across the country, then you may want to look at iwi who are located, mana whenua Māori who are located in those other areas, and make sure that they're included in the national plans. I mean, national stuff is interesting because I think it relates to Māori as well as just general population in New Zealand. We hate the idea that everything gets dreamed up in one place. For example, Wellington. as a solution for everybody, and Māori and it's the same for Māori as well. So start with Māori who you've got and think about, is our kaupapa actually affecting, we may be national, but is it actually affecting people in particular communities? And if it is, should we be dropping into those communities for guidance and leadership around solutions that affect them?
Rebecca says, great presentation, and I think she's asking for a clarification as to whether or not, when referring to collaborating or partnering with Māori, given the treaty, like whether it's the word to use is collaborating or partnering.
I think I was talking about collaboration generally, and so I think some of the examples I gave were iwi were collaborating. And look, in Te Tiriti or Waitangi, it's not partnership anyway. It's tino rangatiratanga and kawanatanga. Partnership is a palatable, I guess, alternative that's used, but they do mean different things. So what I was saying is work with people, and when it comes, work with people.
Frank asks if you'd be able to describe how Māori governance is different to European governance.
Probably lots of different ways. I mean, in some ways, depending on the organisation, it could be the way that governors are appointed over the entities, perhaps sometimes by iwi members. Others appointed in different ways. So the voices that put people in the roles of governance. I think in some examples I've seen with Māori governance, and these are probably iwi based, not always iwi based, but kaupapa Māori based. Strategies are very, very long term, hundreds of years, and the narratives that we draw on narratives from history often as a way to chart the future. So we will draw on the lessons of our sort of pre-European past, and as markers for how we move forward. I think that's something different about Māori governance as well, as terms of the way we look at strategy. Those are probably two things for now. Thank you, everybody. Some great questions, some tips that I hope will be helpful. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar, which is part of a series around working with Māori that we're developing at Allen and Clark. I've really enjoyed talking to you all. Anei no te mihi atu kia koutou. Ka tau ngā manaakitanga ki rongi o koutou katoa i o kainga maha. Tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.